Warm greetings, everyone. Are we coming in loud and clear? Hi, Laura. Thank you. Thank you, Joanna. Good morning, good evening, or good afternoon. Thank you for joining for MAI's webinar, 10 Critical Steps to Creating a Winning Book Cover with Nixon Na. We are glad to see 69 who signed up for this webinar. And we are hoping to see about half of the 69 join us live. Thank you for making time to be with us, to join us live in this webinar. And we hope and pray that this will be a fruitful, a helpful session for everyone. There is an adage that says, don't judge a book by its cover, but actually people do judge a book by its cover. And the cover design is very important aspect of book publishing. We try to catch people's attention through the book cover. And we're so happy to have Nixon Na as our speaker today. Nixon Na is the art director for Tagalog English books of OMF Literature in the Philippines. He has 15 years of experience as a graphic designer. Nixon Na and his wife Joanna are dear to us. My wife and I are stood as sponsors for their wedding, so they're close friends as well. Laura, the sound is breaking. Okay, what about others? Are you hearing us loud and clear? Deborah, sound is breaking. But Ina says it's loud and clear. So yeah, maybe it depends on your internet connection. We hope it will stabilize in the next few minutes. Okay, so let's start our session. Let's start our session today. Thank you, Nixon, for your availability to serve and to share your experience. And we hope that this webinar will indeed be helpful to our participants. So take it away, Nixon.
Okay, thank you, Sir Raja, and thank you for that beautiful introduction. So, hello and good day to everyone. Thank you for joining me today for this webinar on book designing or book cover designing. For today, I have divided the talk into two parts. First part would be the thought process, wherein we will discuss about things that we need to think about before we go into the more technical process of cover designing, which we will tackle in part two, the work process. Which here I will discuss more about the technical aspect, like the programs to use, the things we need to watch out for once we've went through all the thought process. So let's begin. So tip number one for thought process is know the content. So knowing the content, of course, what we need to do is to read the manuscript, read the book, and in some cases, we will need to work with the editor. Now, let me clarify these. Let me get in depth a bit. When you start reading a manuscript, we read the manuscript when the title we are working on will be an original title, and and if it is a republished book, that is when we start to read the book. Now, I know that there are cases that as designers, we may not really have a lot of time to read the book. So I'm not suggesting that we have to read the book cover from cover to cover. But what we really need to do at the very least is to read chapters of the book. And what is really important is to get a good idea of what the topic is about. And by knowing these topics, it will help us and give us ideas on what we can do for a cover. There are other times when we really don't have that much time. This is the time when we will have to work with our editors. For example, in my case, especially when it's about the month of July and August, we will be preparing for our Manila International Book Fair. So during that time, I would be working at a minimum of about 6 to 10 covers, and that would only have about 6 weeks to work on it. And on top of that, I'll also be working on a lot of different posters and marketing collaterals for announcement for the book fair. So definitely with that type of deadline, we really don't have time to really read the manuscript or the book. So this is the best time to work with an editor, and you go. So what you do is you go to the editor and start asking them questions about the book, which I'm sure the editor would have read, and the answers they give you will be your basis to start designing your cover. Now this is not really the best way to do it. I would still strongly suggest we either read the manuscript or the book, because once we start reading the book or the manuscript, sometimes the author will use illustrations or words that will just capture our imagination, and this imagination is what will be our starting point to designing our cover. So right here we have an example of a book which is solely based on the content. This book is about being fashionable, but what's more important about this book is it talks about the inner beauty of a person. So what we did here at OMF is we look for an image of a model which clearly very fashionable, but instead of just showing the model from head to toe and what they're wearing, we crop the image really close to her, therefore giving it a more personal feel. And by giving it a more personal feel, because of the closeness of the camera to the model, it also gives a sense that of the model revealing herself onto you. So it gives that. So it kind of gives the idea of of the of the inner beauty of a person, which is what the book is really all about. And then for tip number 2, we as designers, we need to know who our target market are. So basically we need to simply ask these 2 questions about target market. What is the age group, and who are the primary target market? Now, why do we need to know these 2? Simply by knowing these 2, it will already help decide on the type of image we will use. It will also help us decide on the fonts, and especially with the layout as well. The thing with, for example, if we are going to design a book that is for younger people, we can be more experimental with the layouts that we do. But if the design will be for people who are more advanced in their years, we will have to hold back on experimenting with layouts and go with a more conservative layout. So here I have an example of a series called the Love Struck series. So this book currently now has 6 books, and for this presentation, I'd just like to focus on this 3 for now. I'd like to pick your brains. Who do you think the target market are for this book, or more specifically, Would you try to guess the age group for this?
Deborah said teenagers.
Yes, thank you, Deborah, for that. Yes, teenagers. Exactly. Thank you. So there you go. I guess I've already made my point. By just simply knowing the target market, we can um, we can we can customize the design for them. So and I'd also like to talk about the one in the middle, the color blue. That book is about it's also part of Love Struck series, of course, and but specifically it's for teenagers who have a broken relationship, and it also deals with losing a loved one as well. So because we know the target market, so we still went on with the cute feeling, which is for teenagers, and knowing the content, which is about sadness, we use the color blue. And there's also the little details with the reins and their smile being turned upside down. And also, if you look closely, the icon on their head, the heart, is actually a broken heart. And now the orange one, this book talks about being able to move on from a broken relationship or healing from a lost loved ones. So this time we use orange because orange usually symbolizes a new day, a new start. So there's a reason why we use these colors. And also if you notice the in the in the characters, they don't exactly have a really big smile, but except for that curvy line, which goes to signify that they're not really happy, but they're on their way to healing. So let's move on to the next book. This is another series called the It's Okay series, if I have to translate it into English. Now, for this series, this is this is based on the book of Lamentations, and quite simply, this book is telling Christians that it is okay for us to have negative emotions, really. And this book arises because the author, Rico Villanueva, he's a pastor, and a lot of members in his church would struggle with anger, with being depressed and disappointed with God, and there will be church members that would tell them that that's wrong. You shouldn't feel like that, and it's negative. It's not from the Lord. So he wrote this series to address these points and telling them that it's okay if you don't feel good. It's okay if you're not all right. So with that target market in mind, we decided to go with a very friendly approach. We used household pets for the cover. Um, we could have easily used, for example, the cover with the cat on it. That book's about anger. We could have easily used angry images like a fist up in the air, or people looking really angry. But one aspect about Christian publishing is that as designers, we also have the responsibility to help our readers out. If I were to use these angry image, then chances are we're feeding into their negative emotions even more. So that's why we use a friendlier image. So when people sees these book, given the title, they already know what it's about, and because the image are friendlier, it would still somehow soothe them over what they're struggling over. So what's important here is that we as designers also have that responsibility to help our readers out. And then tip number 3 is to know the author's voice. So basically, in knowing the author's voice, we need to know the author's writing style, and if possible, only if possible, try to meet the author. Now, by meeting the author, I don't necessarily mean that we go out with them, have lunch, dinner, or something like that. No, by meeting the author, it can be as simple as if they do visit the office, you try to observe how they talk, you try to observe how they respond, you try to see if is this guy a funny guy or is he a very serious guy. So you try to determine all this, and you can also, of course also determine this in your writing style. For example, if why is it important to know this? For example, you'll be working in the book, and let's say the author is a very serious guy, doesn't crack a joke, very monotone when he talks. Of course, he would not do a cover that is very funny and humorous, because that will already set off wrong expectations for readers. So right here, I have an example of a project I worked on last year. The book is titled "Age is Just a Number: How to Age Without Growing Old." It is by the husband and wife team, Harold and Arlene Sala. Now, under the description, these are things that our editor gave me to work on. Description of the book, and also the author's writing style. Now, I want you to take notice of some keywords already. Just by looking at the description, we can see that the book is an inspirational book. It's for people advancing in their years. It's practical, it's lighthearted, inspiring. And what's important here for me is that the book is conversational, and it almost feels like someone with wisdom, someone with lots of wisdom giving counsel and advice. So with these in mind, I told myself, hey, I have the perfect kind of cover for this. So there you go. That's perfect. You have a senior guy doing something extreme, skateboarding and all. So this is perfect, right? Well, I guess not, because nowhere in this book author did the author suggest for any senior citizen to go out and start doing reckless things. And this is definitely not how Dr. Sala and Darlene Sala sounds like. So, but this, however, this is more their style of writing. By using an image of a senior man getting ready to go jogging, and we can tell that he's a senior man because if we look closely at his hands, he has old and wrinkled hands. So by choosing an image like this, we tell the readers that even in their old age, they can do practical things like go jogging and keep themselves healthy. So with just a cover like that, you already suggest that this book will offer you practical advice. And also I also adjusted the colors from a vibrant color, because originally the image was very vibrant. I subdued the color, and by doing this, we give the feeling of calmness, and therefore it suggests that the book will be a lighthearted book to read. So, given all that, we were able to connect it to what was shown earlier about what the book is like. And then thought process tip number 4, do your research. Now, in doing our research, first thing that I would always do is to look for similarly themed books and how they were designed. And then once I'm done, I'd start looking for other images and doesn't have to be images, I'd even be listening to music, watching movies. And I'll just draw inspiration from all these. Now, the important thing about doing our research is to build our visual library. Now, building visual library on top of just collecting images, going through Google and stuff like that. What's more important, I mean, that is part of building our visual library, but what's more important is you build your library up here in your head. This is when this is important because by doing this, the next time we have a project that comes in, there's always that part of your brain that says, "Hey, I remember this movie I saw that has these really great effects. I want to get that and get that type of feel because I think it will work for this book." So in building our visual library, it's important that in our free time we can go to a museum, look at art exhibits, watching movies. Especially in these days of social media, there's so many artists we can follow. Just keep looking through their work and just be inspired. And you'll never know. One day you'll have a project and say, "Hey, I can use this ideas I gathered back then and for these projects." So here again is another example. This is a project we recently completed. It's titled "How to Be Yours: Tips on Getting Your Crush's Attention." Now, for this project, I keyed in on the target market, which are millennials aged 17 to 35. And his writing style is conversational, funny, and personal. So in doing my research, because this book is for millennials, and I'm obviously not, I I looked through books that are for that target market, and I don't know how it is where you are, but here in the Philippines, Wattpad is it's an in thing for the millennials. So specifically, I look for covers on the type of covers that are on Wattpad, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, these three covers really struck me. So I kind of base the base my work on these three, and then of course I also look through other media, their movie posters, stock photos, even video games. And because this book is for millennials, again, I look through fashion. Oops, what happened? Okay, I looked through. I did my research on fashion because I didn't know. I didn't know. I don't know what millennials are into or what their fashion statements are. So, in doing my research, I found out that there are these things called bomber jacket. So when I saw this, I said, "Hey, this this is something I want to put on my cover because this will reach out to the millennials. They can closely relate to this." So this here is how the cover ended up looking. So as you can see, the type of font I use is similar to what I saw on the Wattpad covers. And there's also the bomber jacket. And also for this, when I finished working on this, here in the office, we have someone who's a fresh grad, and when he saw this cover, he said, "Hey, that really caught my attention." So that by itself told me we were successful into making this cover. So now we will move on to our work process. So what do we do in our work process? It's tip number 5. First thing we have to do is to finalize the title. Now in finalizing our title, we need to, of course, when the project is given to us, we have to ask, is this the final title or not? If it's not the final title, I would strongly recommend that we work on the thought process first. That's the first four tips. So, and I will discuss this further in a later slide on why we shouldn't start doing the design just yet if we do not have the final title. Tip number 6 is to look for an image and the right image and font. So in looking for the right image and the font, first we need to make sure that the image that we look for will complement the title, and then we need to look for fonts that will complement the image. Now, may notice something here that the title, the image, and the font, these three are connected to each other. I would say that they are a trinity in book cover designing, because if one of these change, especially if the title has changed, chances are your image would change, and because your image changed, your font would most likely change as well. So these three are very symbiotic to one another. That is why I said you need to make sure that the title you're working on has been finalized. Now let's take this for example. This book, Installite, this was given to me earlier this year, about February or March. And when this was given to me, I was told that it was still a working title, but still I had to work on it because they needed it for a presentation. So I said, all right, let's just do a mock cover, because if I go through all the process, I'm going to be doing the work twice. So this book eventually ended up being this book, How to Be Yours. Now, I'll try to drive my point home from here is that imagine if this book is still titled Installite. So it will look like that. And then once you've gone through all the process from steps 1 to 4, you did your research, you did your studies, you did everything, you laid everything out. You laid out everything already, and you're about to ready to give your files to the printing press. And then somebody comes in and says, hey, by the way, that title is not final. We have a new title for that. And the title is How to Be Yours. And it has an even longer subtitle. So imagine, as a designer, how will you fit those really long titles and even longer subtitles into the space that was provided in this design? Now, I don't see how, unless you really did a completely new layout for it. So this is why I stress that if you're only given a working title, just go through the first 4 steps first, get your ideas there, then you start working on it after you have a final title. Now let's say this is the final title. You already have the cover, and then they say, okay, let's change the title from How to Be Yours to Installite. So here's an example of how it will look like. Now the thing is, we can do that easily, but as a designer, this is just not right. Remember what I mentioned about the Trinity, where the title, the image, and the font needs to work together? So this is just not right. If this were the final title instead of How to Be Yours, there's some elements that I would change in this design. First of all, I'd remove the flower, then I would change the hand to a thumbs up position, and then I would use a more angular font. Now you're asking, why would I do all these changes? Well, because the title Installite, it conveys confidence, and while the title How to Be Yours, this would bring to mind a person who's not too confident, but he genuinely wants to know how to be able to go out with the girl he likes. So in my mind, these are some of the changes I do. So by making these changes, we would visually show that the person in the cover has confidence, especially with the change of font from a stroke curvy font to a more angular font. This will also convey confidence. This is why if you look at books by John Maxwell and other leadership books, this is why they use a lot of these, they always pretty much use these kinds of font, very heavy, very angular, and very strong. So this is why I have to stress that these three are very important. Now, once you've done your design, once you have your design in place, you'd want to check your proportions. And by checking proportions, all you really have to, what's really important is to give your title enough breathing space. And what I'd like to use is this 30% to 70% ratio, wherein 30% or maybe even 40% would be for the title. This would give the title enough breathing space, so when people see your books on the shelves, it will be easy to identify your title. And then you have the remaining 70% or 60% for the designer to work his designs in, put the image in, the subtitles and everything else. Now this ratio is not set in stone. It is just something that that works here here at OMF, and we've been using this ratio a lot. But and again, I have to stress this is not set in stone. It can be less, it can be more. It's really up to you. It's really up to what the book is all about. Now, when you're done with all that, just take a break. Tip number 8: take a break. And I also took a break from putting a lot of bullet points here. So what's important about taking a break? Why did I put it here? Well, taking a break, even if it's just 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an entire day, a couple of hours, what's really important about taking a break is that we move away from the design, from the project, and then we come back to it with fresh eyes. This is usually when the designers will see if there's something that they need to adjust in their design. Let's say I took a break for an entire day, I come back the following day, I look at my design. This is usually where I see that, hey, this font is not working, I should change this font. Or I would see that, okay, the spacing for these fonts, it's too far apart, maybe I should bring it closer to one another, or maybe adjust the leading. And other times, it would be, there are cases wherein I would change the layout of the image. So maybe from something that's left heavy, I'll just flip the entire image and make it right side heavy. So this is why it's important to take a break and then just go back to it with fresh eyes. And I strongly recommend this. I really strongly recommend this step. And now we have tip number 9. So we scale down the design, we scale down the cover we did. So by scaling down, you don't really have to make a new file, a smaller file. No, you can just simply open your design in Photoshop or InDesign and just zoom out. And once you've zoomed out, this is the time you check to see if your title is readable. If it's not readable, then you may have to find another font, or you may have to do something about the design. And also, while it's scaled down, you check to see if your cover is attractive and if it can attract attention. This is especially important if you will be doing ebooks and uploading them online, because once online, there will be all these thumbnails side by side. So you need to make sure that your cover will attract attention. So like I said, if once you're zoomed out, looking at it at thumbnail size, and it doesn't seem to attract attention, if it's really if the font is hard to read, you might want to try and simplify your design a bit. It's possible that there are just too many elements. So So there's this thing called the visual noise to your design. So you may want to remove some elements. And who knows, maybe you want to go the extreme route and do a design that's very minimalist, like these two, wherein there's really almost not much design to there's not that many elements that would give you visual noise. Now also, there are cases wherein your design is already really good, but it still fails to catch attention. Sometimes you just feel that this design lacks a certain punch to it. So when that happens, it's possible that you just need to adjust your color saturation, make your design more vibrant, and by going into Photoshop, you can easily just adjust your levels or curves or the hue and saturation. And by doing this, by bumping up all these colors, we can come up with a design that is very vibrant and high contrast. Because something we notice here is that high contrast designs with high contrast or very vibrant, colorful designs also attracts a lot of attention. Now, the example I have here right now, these two books, I actually went beyond just adjusting the contrast, adjusting the curves and vibrance. Um, I actually went into Photoshop and started painting in the colors one by one, just to give it that extra punch to it. So as designers, that might be something you want to do as well, just to really bring out the design and make it more attractive. And we have reached tip number 10 is to use the right tools. Now, to use the right tools, it's simply to just use Photoshop when you're photo editing or when you're doing digital painting, and use Illustrator for vector-based illustration, and InDesign for page design. Now, I have to stress this because I notice a lot of young designers would have the mistake of just using Photoshop for everything. Though yes, you can do that, but Photoshop is not exactly meant for page designing, especially if you're designing book covers and doing layouts. Photoshop is a big no-no, and I will explain why. Because Photoshop is a bitmap based, it's a bitmap based application, while both Illustrator and InDesign are vector based. Now, if you were to use Photoshop and you send off your book cover to the press, chances are once it comes back to you, you'll see that your blurb will look really fuzzy and blurry, therefore making it hard for the readers to read. While if you use InDesign to do your layout, your text will be very sharp, and then so therefore giving it extra quality to your book. And of course, your reader will have an easier time reading your book. Now, also, I do realize that since we're working in the ministry, and a lot of times we don't really have the budget to buy Adobe products because they are very expensive. Here's an inexpensive alternative to the Adobe product. It's called Affinity, and you can go to their website. It's affinity.serif.com. They have their version of Photoshop and Illustrator and InDesign. So just go there. I'm not quite sure what the price is, but I know it's at least half the price of the Adobe products. So if you want, I'll give you guys a few seconds to take a screen capture of this. Okay.
Nixon John Wessel is asking for to go back two slides before. He missed.
Which slide? This slide? This slide?
Yeah, maybe that one.
This is the last. Okay, this one. All right. So this one, I'm stressing the importance of using the right. You're welcome. I'm stressing the importance of using the right software for the right project. So Photoshop, when we're doing photo editing, Illustrator, if we'll be doing vector illustrations such as a company logo, and then InDesign for when we do page layout, that's from the cover all the way to the inside pages. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So moving on. So this is the
Yes, James.
okay.
Okay. Go ahead.
All right. Okay.
Next.
So here, so this is the inexpensive alternative to the Photoshop product. And then next we have, of course, there are always open source. Open source means free. So these are free apps. And the alternative for Photoshop, we have this app called GIMP. And we can go to gimp.org. And then Illustrator, there's Inkscape. You just go to inkscape.org. And then an alternative to InDesign is Scribus. So we go to scribus.net. So once we're in the site, I believe you just need to fill in some forms and then just hit the download button for you to download their program. It's free. It's all free, and these three apps. Uh, I've seen a lot of good reviews about them, so these might be something you'd like to try out as well. Again, I will give you guys a few seconds if you want to take a screen cap.
We'll be sharing slides. So Marek is saying great open source alternative is also Photopea, photopea.com.
Okay, photop.com. That's also
Thank you
another
for
good
sharing
one.
that, Mark.
Thank you, thank you. And then of course, whenever we do covers, we will need images. So instead of going to iStock Photos and get the images and all these sites, which you need to pay quite an amount for the image to use their image. These are also free. These sites also offer free images that we can use. There's Unsplash, Pixabay, VectEasy, and FreePic. These two sites offers free vector-based images. So the only downside with using free images is that chances are other people would use the same image you'll be using. But on the plus side, it's free, and all you really need to do is to credit the photographers. So again, feel free to take a screen cap. And okay, and that's it. Again, my name is Nixon Na. I'm a graphic designer. And at any point, if you guys have any questions you'd like to ask me, you can send me an email at artistnixonna@gmail.com, or you can send me a private message at Facebook. Just look for Nixon Na Art. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Nixon. We'll open the floor for questions right now. I think they may have some questions. Thank you, Deborah.
You're welcome, Deborah. Praise God.
She said. Sergey from Russia. Yeah.
No,
Sergey is really useful webinar.
thank you. Thank you. Praise God for the opportunity to have been able to share
James,
all these.
thank you. Yeah. Congrats to my favorite designer, Ardi.
Thank you,
Okay.
Sir Hardy.
Thank you for your feedback, your encouraging comments. Rick from Brazil. Great job from Ina, your boss.
Thank you. Thank you all. Praise God. Praise God.
Okay, do we have any question? Yeah, we will be sharing the slides. Oh, Paula, thanks a lot. Very useful tips from Mexico.
You're
It's Paula
welcome,
del
Paula.
Castillo. Maggie from Kenya, Janet from UK. We're just glad that many of our friends in the world have joined us live.
Thank you. Thank you all. Glory to God.
Okay, so these are really very practical tips, Nixon, and really very practical and useful. And you have shared resources as well. Do you begin your process in Photoshop and finalize in InDesign?
Yes, that's how I do it. Although there are some designers who just go straight into InDesign, but I grew up using Photoshop a lot, and I was actually guilty of using Photoshop for everything when I started here at OMA. So yes, the answer to that is yes. I begin my design process with Photoshop because I'm used to it. So every time I'm going to try something out, it's easier for me to make do my studies using Photoshop.
Yes. Thank you, Rick. That's a really helpful question that you've asked. Okay. Yeah, we did very well. Of time, Nixon, you've paced yourself very well. So you've covered the 10 tips. See my question above.
Okay.
Charlie,
Oh,
what
okay.
was your question,
Uh,
Charlie? Let's see. See Charlie's question. What was Charlie's question? Sorry, Charlie. Could you repeat your question, Charlie? It looks like we did not catch your question.
he asked if what is the first thing that you put
The,
on a cover? What is the first thing you tend to put on a draft of a cover? First thing. All right. Well, for me, usually, um, when someone gives me when I'm given a project, the so after being able to read part of the manuscript or the book, I would look for an image first. That's the first thing I'd put in the cover, and then I work my way from there. So if the image, let's say, I found an image that maybe it's a painting, so maybe I'd like to use a font that has a bit more of an organic feel to it. So that's pretty much how I work. I would look for the image first.
you
But
start with the
again, other
image.
people have yeah. But again, other people have different approach.
Thank you. John has a question here. Do you have any advice about portraying Jesus on a book cover?
Mm. Um, Portraying Jesus. Personally, I don't really show Jesus's face, but more on aspects of Jesus, perhaps. Um, I don't by not showing Jesus' face. I don't mean that I crop the image. Sometimes there are times what I do is to just make it hide his face in a shadow or maybe just a silhouette. Um, yeah, there are lots of ways around it, but one thing that I don't really that I'm not a big fan of is to show his face.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay,
James,
there's a
do you have
question.
used photographs of people on your photos? You usually need some kind of consent or legal documents for that.
So do you... okay. The Here at OMF anyway, what we do is we either either buy the images from iStock or other royalty-free sites, or lately we've been using a lot of the free sites as well. So this way we
What
don't really have to uh,
what
we
about
don't really have to.
what about taking photos of people that you will use, let's say a family, and you will use that photo of a family in your book cover,
So
local
what we do
family,
there
let's
is we
say.
would ask, is we would get their permission first before we use their photos for a cover. As far as legal documents, so far we haven't gone to that extent yet here at OMF. I guess an
What do you need
advice
a
is
written
that
consent?
hmm,
You
what
need a written consent from the, let's say, from the family, from the parents.
um, it would be best if you get one. I would advise that you get one if you can. Um,
Hmm.
but a lot of times, again, I can only speak from experience, is that we would get uh, either our own family or our staff. That way, we
Hmm.
don't really have to go through all the legal stuff. There,
Photos
yeah,
of
we
your
take pictures
friends
of
and family.
ourselves. Yes.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah. Take pictures of ourselves.
Yes,
Yeah.
a lot of our posters here at OMF are actually our co-workers.
Yeah. Our staff on book covers. Indeed. Yeah. Any tips for designing back covers from Hannah?
Ah, yeah, very good question. Uh, Back covers. So when given the back cover, the blurb, um, personally, I would like to be able to reflect aspect of the front cover, the back. It'd be just certain elements, perhaps. In the case of, if you remember the book How to Be Yours, um, I took the texture of the jacket and put it on the back. That way, it has that one continuous feel to it. In fact, for that book, I did not only just took the texture, I also illustrated some design to make it look like the back side of a jacket. Now, other times I would just get small elements, like for example, we could for the series, It's Okay series. If you remember, there's a frame, a square frame there. So I just reflect that layout at the back. So again, we give it that one cohesive feel to it. And that's what's important about it, by the way. You need to give it a very cohesive feel. Then I would always ask for a book hook. These are catchphrases you can use. So I would set these usually about 3 or 4 times larger than your blurb. And then the blurb, I would advise, if it's possible for the editors to keep it really short and catchy, because from personal experience, I don't really see people spending too much time on the blurb, and they want to read it, they want to get the information as quickly as possible. So condense your blurb as best you can. And of course, don't when you lay it out, um, don't let the text go all the way to the edge. Leave at least maybe about half an inch from the edge. That way, we don't create what feels like an eye strain when you read the blurb.
Mhm.
Okay,
Thank
I
you.
hope that answers the question. Okay,
Joanna,
if there are illustrations.
as you get inputs from author, editor, marketing staff, how do you screen or filter comments, feedback on revisions?
Again.
That your wife, Joanna, is asking,
Ah,
how do you screen or filter comments, feedback on revisions from author, editor, marketing staff? As there are many comments,
okay.
many inputs.
Okay. When I was still new to this job, I kind of take it personally, but as time progressed, I guess you learn how to filter it. But my initial presentation actually have about 5 extra slide that I was going to use as an intro, but then it will take too long. Basically, it tackles the difference about being a graphic artist and a graphic designer. Now, what I wanted to say in that initial presentation is that we need to come in with a designer mentality in mind, because one of the difference between being a graphic artist and a graphic designer is a graphic artist, it deals more with self-expression. So you'll see digital painting and or sometimes an artwork, simply an artwork, an illustration. And then if people criticize it because it's a personal expression, they'll be offended, they'll be angry. But when you come in and um, and put yourself as a designer, you start saying, okay, I'm a designer. What the designer does is designer gives visual solutions. So if people gives you feedback that says this cover doesn't work or this design doesn't work, you have to take it objectively and say, because I'm a designer, I give visual solution. So there are right then and there, if people says there's a problem with it, it means you were not able to solve this, to give a solution. So you really have to work to redo your design and really um, give your design some thought.
And not be offended.
And yes, not be offended. And that takes a bit more time to get used.
John Wessel is asking if there are illustrations in the book, comic style. If there are illustrations inside, is it important that the cover seems similar to those illustrations inside the content inside the book? Does the illustrator who works on illustrations in the book also have to be involved with the designing or illustrating the cover?
Okay. Um, I would strongly advise that if you have a comic book style illustration in the cover, you also reflect that inside. Again, this is all for making your book cohesive and it feels like one entire product and not and that it came from anywhere left and right and they just put together. So yes, I would strongly suggest that if you have a illustration on the cover, either have the same illustration inside again, or if there are stock images, look for similar images. If not, then if you're the illustrator himself, then you make extra illustrations for them. Take for example the Love Struck series. Those characters on the cover, the boy and the girl, they are also inside, and we did new illustrations for it every chapter, and each illustration corresponds to what the chapter is about. Um, Also, the question is, does the illustrator who work on the illustration in the book also have to be involved with the designing? Um, Here at OMF, and I believe yes, a friend of mine who works for another publisher, an art director for another publisher, they let the illustrator give their they get their feedback, they get their comment, but they don't exactly have the final say. Because again, there's the difference between being an artist and a designer. We once had a project the wherein the artist was criticizing about layouts. They're saying that our layout was bad, and then when we asked, okay, if you have another layout in mind, why don't you help us out? What is your vision for it? And when we saw his layout, well, it was artistic, but then it's really hard to read. So there's that aspect to it. As a designer, you know how to lay the text out right so it's readable and it's pleasing to the eyes. But in our experience with this artist is that he gave layout that are just so hard to read, and especially because this is a children's book, you have to make it even easier. You have to really make it easier to read because if they're children's book, these kids are just starting to read. So there's that aspect to it. Okay. Is there another question here?
Okay. Rick is asking, how many options do you usually present to the editor, or how many studies do
Mm,
you prepare?
okay. Usually I would show about three three to four at most.
Three to four
But when
different
I'm working on
options.
it, I actually, yes, about three to four. But the truth is, I usually make up to about 6 or 7 studies, but I would just choose what I think are the best ones, and those are the ones I would show. But yes, usually at least three.
At least usually studies.
Yes, yes.
Okay. So James is having a problem looking for the Affinity. Is that the alternative to Adobe Design, InDesign? Okay.
Oh, okay, okay. I
So
had the impression that
Amor
they
is
they
answering
already.
James's question. Okay, so Amor answered James's question. Thank you, Amor. Yeah, Scribus.net is the alternative to Adobe InDesign. Okay,
Right. Thank you for answering that, Omar.
so I think we've used up our time. We've used up our time, and we just want to thank Nixon. Nixon, thank you so much. You did very well. Excellent
You're welcome, sir.
presentation.
Thank you. Thank you so
Uh,
much for inviting me.
yeah, so we are. Oh, we would like to thank you. We're grateful for your sharing, and we hope that really there are good takeaways for our participants, and that you will continue to design excellent book covers for your respective publishing ministries. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Again,
Praise God. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
praise the Lord indeed. Again, we are excited to and looking forward to Lit World in Singapore, October 28th, November 2. We're hoping to see at least 250 writers, editors, publishers, graphic designers, book designers come to Lit World this October 28th, November 2, Singapore. Look for details from our website, litworld.org. And we will send out our announcements and invitations for next month's webinar. We are not ready yet, but we will send them out to you. So yes, we will have more webinars coming, Laura. Yes. Thank you. And if you have not, if we have posted past webinars onto our website, and just if you have not watched our past webinars, just go through the list there and see which one is helpful to you. Well, thank you, Ina. I will see you soon in Manila. Yes, we're flying. My wife and I and my youngest son are flying to Manila to attend our son's wedding. Yes, Ina, we'll see you next week. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us. And thank you for your participation. And thank you for this interaction here, a lively interaction amongst our participants. God bless you all. See you again
God
in our
bless
next
everyone.
webinar. God bless. Thank you, Nixon.
God bless.
Bye
You're
for
welcome,
now.
sir. Thank you. Okay, bye bye. See you.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.